we have microphones for the panelists as well? Good morning, everyone. I think we are ready to start. Excellencies, honorable and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Welcome to this COP27 side event here on Gender Day at the African Pavilion, which is hosted by the African Development Bank with contributions from the AfDB, UNIDO, UN Climate and Environment, International Committee of the Red Cross, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And the title of the event today is Enabling and Tracking Gender-Responsive Green Jobs and Recovery. My name is Ingville Solvang, and I am Deputy Director and Head of Climate Action and Inclusive Development at the Global Green Growth Institute, and it is a great honor to be the moderator of the session today. And I would like to thank the AfDB for the opportunity. And as the title of this session implies, today we will talk about the opportunities and the risks in the transition towards green, low-emission economies, particularly in terms of the gender gap in the labor markets, and with a focus on Africa. Women are underrepresented in economic opportunities in all economies around the world, according to the World Economic Forum. Women are more likely to be employed in informal sectors, and women are more likely to hold vulnerable employment. Women are also more likely to be unemployed and underemployed. And starting with understanding the context in Africa, which has very eloquently been articulated by UN Women and the AfDB in a report on green jobs for women in Africa, we are in good place today to look at some of these issues and these challenges. We will also touch upon the fact that inequalities were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and its ripple effects. So I'm very pleased now to welcome Her Excellency, Madam Rachel Ruto, the First Lady of Kenya, to give the first opening remarks delivered through a pre-recorded video message.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to be sharing my opening remarks on a day set aside to reflect on gender and to discuss with you the important agenda of enabling and tracking gender-responsive green jobs recovery. I'm passionate in advancing women economic empowerment and understand the importance and positive impact of engaging gender equality discussions within the labor market. The issue of gender inequality is a global phenomenon and an integral aspect of development. Besides being a right in itself, gender equality is also an end in itself. It is one of the fundamental requirements for locally achieving Kenya's Vision 2030 that complements the attainment of UN Sustainable Development Goals. As key actors for environmental protection, women possess knowledge, capabilities, and effective networks to drive real solutions in the area of sustainability and resource scarcity. Most importantly, they hold key roles across society that influences how to produce, consume, and market sustained solutions. Women are therefore important agents of change, and their contribution and participation in green economy activities is essential for achieving equitable, sustainable development. The Kenya Green Economy Strategy and Implementation Plan recognizes gender inclusion as one of its strategic pillars outlined under social inclusion and sustainable livelihoods. There is an inherent need to respect the role of gender in the development of a green economy. One of the key priorities within the Kenyan Green Economy Blueprint is retention and creation of employment, especially by exploiting green growth opportunities while providing existing and new workers with the education and skills to meet the demands of new green jobs. Additionally, it includes focusing on critical areas within sectors where Kenya can develop green labor-intensive work. Tracking green job development, including monitoring growth in green jobs over time in terms of numbers, gender balance, and which subsectors are performing best, can help identify areas where policies are having a positive impact and where more attention is needed. Green economy and green jobs actions must respect labor standards, laws, and practices, wage minimums, safety, workers' rights, and other elements of fair and decent work. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular discourse is integral in Kenya's agenda in transforming towards a green economy and is an engagement I am passionate about. I wish to thank the African Development Bank for their friendship, partnership, and convening various actors to engage in tracking gender-responsive green jobs recovery. I also wish to reiterate that one of my key agenda items is championing gender inclusion in the labor market, which results in women economic empowerment. You have my word. I will ensure that beyond COP27, we will align and partner to advance the women in the area of green economy and green jobs. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much to Her Excellency, Madam Ruto. We are also very blessed today to be in the presence and in the company of the Honorary Minister of Environment and Forestry of Kenya, Madam Soipan Toya. Welcome to this session, and I am very pleased to welcome you to the stage to deliver an opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed, it is my esteemed pleasure to be speaking at this crucial discussion on enabling and tracking gender-responsive green jobs recovery. Climate change has emerged as one of the greatest threats to life on Earth. It is also a very serious challenge to human well-being globally, with particular intensity on the African continent as the most vulnerable to climate and weather extremes. Such vulnerability poses serious adverse repercussions for Africa's precarious socioeconomic systems. It is imperative that urgent measures be taken to effectively cushion our people, their livelihoods, economies, and communities, and rapidly eradicate vulnerability. Ladies and gentlemen, the climate emergency disproportionately impacts women's and girls' economic opportunities. In the first instance, developing countries bear the burden and costs of climate change through food insecurity, drought, floods, damage to property and productive assets, and diminished livelihoods. At the same time, there is a clear gender dimension to the climate emergency, where women and girls are more impacted by the changing climate. Structural gender inequalities, such as inequity in unpaid care intensify with the climate crisis. And as the climate and weather-related shocks increase, the amount of time required to care and domestic activities also increases. Ladies and gentlemen, this has an effect on girls who are more likely to be kept out of education to help with domestic chores, and on women as it reduces their time to engage in productive and paid work. In addition, increasing gender gaps in the world of work demonstrate the deep and persistent barriers that women face to realize their economic rights and opportunities. Transition to green economies holds huge potential in terms of creating wealth and jobs for African countries. However, women will not automatically benefit from this. Current green work policies and investments focus on male-dominated sectors, such as the science, technology, engineering, and maths, that is STEM, construction, and manufacturing, and high barriers to women's economic justice risks continued exclusion of women from these opportunities and potentially further entrenching gender inequalities in the world of work. Ladies and gentlemen, focused interventions are needed to ensure that the green transition is just and inclusive and will allow diverse groups of women to take full advantage of the transition. The green transition presents a huge potential to create jobs, especially in sectors set to benefit directly from substantial investment to, example, clean energy and infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure women can benefit from the green transition, governments, private sector, and key decision makers should focus on gender equality in the transition to green economies. And this can be done by incorporating a gender lens into the green transition and green work opportunities, proactively addressing barriers to women benefiting from the green transition, including by upskilling women and girls for green and higher skilled jobs. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, to further ensure women benefit in the transition, we must generate decent green work opportunities for women by providing targeted training and education to open up high-skilled work opportunities and traditionally male-dominated sectors, open those to women. We must increase the understanding of gender inequalities in private sector and take targeted actions to upskill, reskill, and prioritize women workers for green work opportunities and foster women's leadership in the green transition. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard, Her Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Kenya, Mrs. Rachel Ruto, will lend her voice to gender inclusion in the labor market, women economic empowerment, and gender-relevant green recovery measures. And there lies an opportunity for us, because from the highest office, we have a voice, we have a champion, and this we open up to potential partnerships, potential collaborations, so that we take this to another level. In conclusion, transitioning to a green economy requires significant and targeted resources in terms of finance, investment, technology, and capacity building. Therefore, intentional integration of the green transition in the planning, budgeting is crucial for successful implementation and transition. I wish to thank the Africa Development Bank for convening this discussion to provide insights, best practices, south-to-south learning, relevant tools, and recommendation for a successful green transition and economy. As I finish, ladies and gentlemen, women, and in the same breath, girls, are nurturers. We need to nurture our environment. We need to nurture, focusing on green initiatives. And women, when we place them at the center of it, we are going to create sustainable solutions to the environmental and climate change crisis we are faced with. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. Asanteni.
Thank you very much for that, for setting the scene so eloquently and for your leadership, Madam Minister. We are now ready to go to the next virtual speech today from Ms. Malado Kaba, who is Director of Gender, Women and Civil Society at the African Development Bank. We may have a bit of a technical, I see some people running around in the background trying to get Miss Kaba on the line. Perhaps while we wait for that, I will take the opportunity now to call the panelists up on stage. Hopefully, Ms. Kaba will be able to join us in a minute. We will continue the conversation with a panel. We have 5 very experienced experts on the topic of today. So I'm very pleased first to welcome Ms. Vanessa Ushi to the stage, please. To the second chair there would be great. So Ms. Ushi is Acting Director of the African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center at the African Development Bank, also one of the lead authors of the UN Women and African Development Bank report on green jobs for women in Africa. I also wish to welcome Mr. Marcus Taulborg to the stage, who is a UN Youth Delegate for Climate and Environment. Welcome. Also, Mr. Tarek Mtaira, Director of the Division of Decarbonization and Sustainable Energy at UNIDO. We also have Ms. Milagros Rivas, Division Chief of Advisory Services at the IDB Invest. And last and certainly not least, Ms. Jean-François Yao, Special Project Manager at the International Committee of the Red Cross. I will now just check to see whether we've had success establishing contact with Ms. Kaba virtually. No? I believe, do we have Ms. Kaba on the line? No, okay. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties.
Ladies and gentlemen.
There. So we will go right to the panel.
I would like to announce Her Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of I would also
Hello, yes.
allies for joining us today, be it in person or online. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, when livelihoods are highly dependent on the environment, vulnerability is potentially higher. More specifically, women have much to lose, since not only their livelihoods but also their responsibility for the survival and health of their children are linked to their natural surroundings. Over the last 2 years, women and girls were hardest hit by the economic and financial shocks of the pandemic, in part because a large number of African women work in the informal sector where social protection is rare. The African Development Bank focuses on climate and women economic empowerment through green entrepreneurship and green jobs initiatives. The bank is, in this regard, not only a thought leader on the African continent, it also converts its ideas into actions. In 2021, for instance, the bank mobilized about 400 million of external climate finance for its projects and programs, including 300 $220 million for the Green Climate Fund. A few days ago, here at COP27, 20 African youth-led enterprises, of which 50% are women-led, won a grant fund of up to $100,000 each in this year's African Youth Adaptation and Climate Investment Funds. In addition to the grant, each winner benefits from a 12-month accelerator program to help them grow their businesses, deepen their impact, and create decent jobs. The program boosts sustainable job creation by supporting entrepreneurship and youth-led innovations in climate change adaptation and resilience across Africa. The bank is also engaging the private sector. The AFAWA initiative, through the Climate Investment Fund, committed $20 million into a project on financing climate resilient agricultural practices in Ghana with EcoBank. It targets women entrepreneurs through lines of credit. This intervention will target 400 women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises, ultimately benefited more than 373,000 people. The African Development Bank's Fashionomics Africa launched a new sustainable fashion competition with cash prizes, mentoring, new branding packages, and other support for winning African designers of sustainable and circular fashion industry. This initiative continues to foster gender responsive green jobs with the Fashionomics Africa contest, highlighting the ingenuity that African fashion designers consistently demonstrate through the strength of their culture and heritage. For example, our most recent winner, Nigerian Gift Raji, designs clothes using biodegradable buttons made from coconut shells instead of plastic. Her boutique design firm sells a hat partially made from water hyacinth plant fibers. Water hyacinth is an invasive species that blocks sunlight and reduces oxygen levels in Lagos River areas, posing a serious threat to marine life. The collecting of coconut shells and trawling of rivers removing water hyacinth are the start of a green job value chain. The bank's funding and training is helping designer Gift Raji to further formalize her business and reach more markets. These are small steps, but they are steps in the right direction, and they are incredibly promising steps that need to be scaled up. And the bank, who has a strong comparative advantage in advocating for and promoting gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment across the continent, can do it with other committed partners. To conclude, we need to clearly understand the context of the challenges before us, then use the knowledge to influence national, regional, and international climate finance mechanisms for just and therefore gender-responsive climate action. This achievement is made possible when we deliver on commitments to climate financing in an inclusive, accountable, and transformative way. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to Ms. Kaba, who did join us after all, so that was great to have her perspectives and for her to highlight the potential of women in Africa in the transition towards green and sustainable economies. So yeah, as I mentioned, we are now joined on stage by a fabulous panel of experts. So we'll do a round of questions and have some presentation from the panelists. If we have time afterwards, we will get to some questions and answers with participation from the audience. So please get your notepads out and take down your questions. So starting with you, Vanessa, it's great to have you, and I must admit to have used your work quite frequently in
gentlemen, excellencies, and distinguished speakers and participants, thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. So, as you rightly mentioned, and all the excellent introductory speeches have said, women can benefit from the green transition. What we have seen in our research, which we just quoted, is that there are opportunities for women in emerging sectors, such as construction, energy, transportation, and agriculture. And we even see opportunities in forestry and tourism. But what is the challenge here? The challenge is around disparity, that there are fewer women who are likely to benefit from higher paying jobs. And you look at sectors like energy, transportation, and construction, but we see women concentrated in sectors including agriculture, subsistence agriculture, waste management, and biomass. And the question now is, how do you move women into the higher paying jobs? On the other hand, we also see new opportunities for creating indirect jobs. Women are finding niche areas in the green economy. We have things like green construction, renovation, and energy efficiency or renewable energy. One of the big challenges is the cultural norms. So look at construction. It's seen as a man's job, that women should not be in construction. So there's an uphill battle in trying to address these norms that prevent women from benefiting into the green economy. So what can we do? I think the first thing is trying to remove barriers to education, particularly in STEM disciplines, because this is the only way that the foundation is set for women to have the skills necessary to compete in the green economy. Secondly, the need for reskilling, upskilling, and acquiring the necessary skill sets, which other speakers have mentioned. There are also legal barriers in our policies, our legislations, which we have to address in order for women to be able to compete and participate more effectively. I think on a very practical basis, how women's work is defined. Look at the care economy. So we talked about women having more responsibilities as a result of climate disasters. So how can that be negotiated with men in households, in communities, even at the national level, in order that women have more time to develop themselves? And I think regionally there's a need for more cooperation between African countries. So we started out with our research and what the bank is doing on creating green jobs for women. But we need more data, more granular data on a country-by-country basis. And there are opportunities in national green economy plans. We heard from Kenya what they're trying to do. So that's a very good low-hanging fruit that we can leverage on. And even the national adaptation plans, low emission development strategies, we can find an area in there to really push green jobs for women agenda. So I think this is a very timely conversation to be having this at this COP. And just to reiterate that it can be done. There are emerging opportunities, but we need to change the way we support women. How women network, how women businesses are supported. And if there are any green opportunities that we see, how can women be transitioned into them? So as I said, upskilling, reskilling, giving them the right information and knowledge to compete and participate. And then the laws that should be changed. And at regional level, how African countries can collaborate more effectively to have regional plans of action towards creating green jobs. So I'll leave it there.
Excellent, Vanessa. And one of the things that came out in your report on women and green jobs in Africa was a sentence that says that every green job created is potentially a job for women, although it may be in sectors that are currently dominated by men. And I think that's very much speaking to the type of leadership and the type of trailblazing that we will need to see from women around the world. I don't know if you want to speak to that very briefly.
Well, I mentioned some new sectors like energy, construction, and transportation where there are opportunities. But in terms of leadership, it's really about setting targets. There's a need to have gender targets, particularly for green jobs. And we've seen examples from some African countries. We heard what the Kenyan government is doing, for
excellent. I fully agree with you. And speaking of sort of the long-term perspective and leading the way and trailblazing, I want to turn to Marcus as a representative of the young generation of trailblazers. I'm loving the energy of the younger generation that comes after us. And now, to what degree do you think that the next generation of climate policymakers is integrating gender as a priority in the climate agenda? And maybe also speaking a bit to sort of the impacts of COVID-19. I mean, the young generation also being highly impacted by being generation COVID-19 to some extent, if we want to call it that. So what the remaining impacts of COVID-19 on green employment for women across the world from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great question. When we see it, then we can see that it is women between 24 and 34. They hit the hardest by the COVID. They are the one who suffered the most. And when we generally see about the gender gap, then we can see that COVID hasn't just maintain the status of it. It has worsened it all over the world, and from my perspective, then I feel like, of course, it's going too slow. But the last 100 years, then it has been a still progress we have seen. Some down, but most of it has been progress. But COVID has been an all in all downwards of the gender gap. So this has been traumatic and a worsening experience, because when we look into the future, then we see there will be more pandemic. The WHO were saying that in the future years, then we'll see a lot more of these pandemic. Maybe not globally, but then more regionally, locally. When we talk about more crisis in general, then we will see that there will be more. Some of them will be from the climate change. And if we do not have a focus, a gender-sensitive focus, then we will miss out, because we will not achieve a green transition if we don't have women with us. Women are the most important thing to have with us to be able to have a green and sustainable future. So if we are not collaborating together, if we are not have a focus that we need, that is not we need to have a focus that shows that women should not be the one who are hit the hardest of a crisis. It should be equal. If we don't have the ability to change that, then we will never be able to face these crises that we see ahead of us, because there are coming a lot more of these crises. So we need to find a way to do this in a way that will be more incentive to this point. And as youth, then the gender thinking and the way that we need to have a more equal access to these jobs. I hope and I see a way that this is actually a focus in a lot of youth. Of course, it has risen from generation to generations. My grandmother had it as a little focus. My mother a little bit more, and now me. I have it more than them. And then hopefully, when generations pass on, then we will see a more equal. But it's going too slow, and when we have seen a resilience like this by the COVID, then we need to push even harder for more equal and more gender-based solutions on these topics. So yeah, I think we need to prepare us and learn from COVID to be more able to tackle the future crisis that we are seeing ahead of us, and to use that knowledge we have learned from COVID and to see what that had affected to better be prepared for the next crisis we are seeing ahead of us.
Thank you, Marcus. We like the impatience of the younger generation, and been in this game for a couple of decades. I think
Oh, okay, now, okay. Sorry with the noise. Well, first of all, good morning, and warm welcome to all of you, and thank you to the African Development Bank for the invitation to partner with you on this important conversation. I think, let me start by just putting a bit of context on the broader idea of a circular economy. When we talk about circular economy, fundamentally, we are rethinking basically the entire relationship between production and consumption, reconceptualizing our material flow in the economies with an emphasis on reducing basically material flows and increasing knowledge flows. And in that frame of thinking, there are different types of economic activities that contribute to this kind of reconfiguration of the economic model, between redesigning our products to business models, to increasing the durability and use of existing products, to enhancing the end-of-life usability and recycling of materials in the broader economic system. And there, I think, when we look at where are the numbers in terms of women and men participation in the value addition across this reconfiguration, we see basically that on the lower value addition activities within the circular economy, like recycling and collection, women are and even children are disproportionately represented. And on the higher value addition within this reconfiguration, where we are redesigning products and redesigning systems and redesigning processes, tend to be more men represented there. If I can use the analogy between like 80-20, so 80 women, 20 men downstream, the other way around, 80 men, 20 women on the higher value addition. And of course, when you look deeper into this, fundamentally the issues there come from the structural problem of more women and girls going into science, technology, and engineering, because a lot of that work that is happening on the product and system redesign is also science-based engineering, and we don't see enough support for women to get into this job. So we have to tackle the structural problem there to get more women engaged in the higher value addition. So in UNIDO, what we're trying to do in some of our capacity building programs to create what we call entrepreneurial or innovation-based solutions around the circular economy model, which basically where the higher value addition is. Without gender lens targeted intervention, you don't get the numbers. So we started with this innovation acceleration program almost 8 years ago. We were getting on average 3 women entrepreneurs to around, well, actually not even 3, 2 women entrepreneurs to 8 men entrepreneurs if we take percentage 100%. And then we had to rethink the model to have a deliberate targeted strategy to bring more women entrepreneurs or innovators into that space. And by using, for example, simple interventions. If you send a coach to train in a particular context, maybe if you send a man and a woman coach together, you get more women participating. So thinking more. Also, when you advise on the financing of these enterprises, if you bring a gender lens on the investment and the financing, you actually get a better business case to improve. So that's one dimension of the equation where we see that you do have to have a targeted, deliberate strategies to increase the participation of women in the higher value addition around circular economy. The second dimension of this conversation is the whole idea that reconceptualizing our economic production consumption patterns fundamentally is about changing behavior and how we as consumers react to products, buy products, how do we use products, how do we relate to the flow of products in the economy. It's all about behaviors both. and strategies, when a country embarks on a sectoral strategy to increase the adoption of circular economy principles without paying attention to behavioral patterns, and that's where gender perspectives is so fundamental to understanding how to change behavior. Women in many product categories, women have better knowledge of the use and reuse of products than men actually, or household, particularly at the household level and in other sectors. So we realized that actually strategies, country level strategies, we did an analysis of a few country level strategies, when they put these grand plans down the road for 20 years to get their economies on a circular economy, there's very little understanding of, because of the behavioral levers that you need to change, and not enough consultation from a gender-sensitive sort of dialogue on how to change behavior. So without understanding the dynamics of behavior and the perspective of men and women or family, household, collectively on how we shape the consumption and use of products, we are not going to get the right design strategies to put more circular products on the market. So these are two things. And so again, here the solution is, when you design your circular economy strategy at the national level, you have to have a better consultation and understanding of who influence norms, behaviors, and shapes these in terms of consumption patterns. So these are just two dimensions I wanted to share. Thank you, and back to you. No, absolutely. I mean, partly government needs to create the enabling frameworks for circular business models to happen in the economy, and creating the incentives. And so on the enabling framework, basically government needs to engage proactively in designing these. But on the design side, when firms wants to really influence the consumption at the end of the process, it is the firm's role as well, the enterprise. And when we look at large multinationals that dominate a lot of the product flows, who sits on the sort of the executive boards, the senior management, and product design, it's only the majority as men engineers. And so we also need to change that mindset. So it's both on the firm, the enterprise level, and also on the policy making level.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much, and thank you to the African Development Bank for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with all of you. As the moderator has said, I am representing the Inter-American Development Bank, that is an entity focused on Latin America and has like 3 different institutions. One is the AfDB public part that works with the public sector, IDB Lab that works in new technologies, and IDB Invest where we work with the private sector. So in IDB Invest, climate and gender and diversity are two strategic pillars of all of our activity. Just 1/3 of our investments and our financing last year was climate finance, and 50% of our projects had a gender component. So let me, before I start talking a little bit about the solutions, what I would like is to give an overview on what's going on in the Latin American region. So the opportunity, the green opportunity or the climate finance opportunity is huge because it's estimated that 20% of the GDP needs to be invested by 2030 in different infrastructures that are resilient and that contribute to the development goals. So this implies that 50 million of new jobs will be created by 2030. What is also clear is that women are not accessing to this type of jobs. If you consider the Latin America region, our region ranks the 3rd in the world in terms of reaching gender parity. And if we consider the jobs that have been created between 2015 and 2021 on the transition to green jobs, almost 70% were for men. So we need to make sure that we are able to build a just transition. And just transition, for me, has like two components. One is something that we have been discussed, is the need to really upskill women and that they have the opportunity to access to this type of jobs. But it has another dimension that is as important as the other one, is that we need to make sure that women-owned companies, especially SMEs, are able to have access to technologies and that they have access to finance to really move to this just transition. And it is important because when we are thinking about, for example, smart agriculture, many small farmers, they are women. And they need to be able to have access to these technologies that allow them to really adapt and benefit from these green opportunities that exist. So what are the things that we are doing in IDB Invest to really address these challenges? We are very active in terms of helping our clients in the private sector on training women. What we do, for example, if we are financing a solar plant, what we do, we provide them with technical assistance to really make sure that they create a specific training for women. And for example, in Jamaica, with Soleco, we were able to hire 15% of women just assembling solar panels. I come from the construction sector. This is huge, I mean, because it's clearly a male-dominated sector. So training is a very important one, but we are as development institutions and multilateral development banks, we have some tools that can accelerate this transformation. And they are based in solutions with blended finance. We have one specific product that is what we call performance-based incentives, by which when we provide a loan, for example, to a client, we include a portion of blended finance, concessional finance, that reduces the cost of the financing if they achieve certain goals, for example, incorporating women in their workforce. So this has demonstrated to be extremely powerful in terms of incentivizing our clients to really incorporate women. I mean, I have many examples in Brazil where, I mean, we have been able in assembling solar plants or in construction wind farms where we have reached 20% of women in the workforce, which is enormous. So with this, we can address the issue of women benefiting for these job creation opportunities. But there is another element that I was just mentioned, that it is about how we ensure that we are able to provide the solutions and the financing that the women-owned SMEs have. And this is extremely important to work at two levels. First of all is financial sector, financial intermediaries. We need to be able to work with financial intermediaries so that they provide special lines for women, green lines for women, so that they can provide financing to adapt to climate change, to introduce new technological solutions, but they are especially focused on women. And we are also working in the region with different banks to really work in this area. And the second thing is taking advantage that the loans that we provide to big companies, for example, in the agricultural sector, we incentivize our clients to really provide some technical solutions to their, for example, small farmers. We have this in Naturasol, in one of our clients, by which we provided a loan to them, to Naturasol, that is an important agricultural company. And what we did with them was to provide a specific financing and a specific program. And we provided with a kind of iPads to honey producers so that they were able to anticipate climate events, so that they can manage better the irrigation systems and everything. So acting with companies, with agricultural companies or with tractor companies to really, make sure that they also work with their value chains, providing the access to new technologies to women-owned companies. So I think that tools are there. There is a long way to run, but we are in a good path, and with all the sustainable linked loans and all the sustainable linked bonds are also some tools that will be critical for the future to really make sure that we have a just energy transition.
Great, thank you very much, Milagros. And it's great to see the innovation in this area and the importance of getting that up to scale to really truly accelerate. Just last month, the UN released a report, the UN Women released a report that at current pace, it will take us 300 years to close the gender gap. I don't have 300 years. My daughters don't have 300 years, and the ones that really do not have 300 years are the most vulnerable women, many of whom are based on the African continent. So it's great now to turn to Jean-François from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and from your position where you are sitting now. What role do you see for partnerships between humanitarian and development actors when it comes to responding to women's vulnerabilities in the sector? I think really here bringing the conversation down to that reality, I think it is very, very important. So if you could give us a couple of examples of how you are addressing this in your work.
Bonjour. Je voudrais avant tout propos remercier la Banque africaine de développement de nous avoir ouvert cette plateforme de discussion. Et je me réjouis d'autant plus que je prends la parole après Madame Rivas, qui a parlé de finances, d'investissement. Et je suis d'autant plus à l'aise que de tous les discours, il n'a pas été fait mention des pays en conflit et en situation de violence. Et comme vous le savez, les dernières statistiques l'ont montré, que parmi les 25 pays les plus exposés aux risques climatiques, 14 sont en conflit et 14 sont en Afrique. Et donc, le CICR, qui est une institution qui a pour mandat de protéger et d'assister les personnes les plus vulnérables dans ces situations de conflit et de violence, a à la charge d'assister les femmes qui sont les plus vulnérables et qui sont touchées par l'effet combiné et des changements climatiques et du conflit. Et pour en venir à votre question, en face des besoins de ces femmes vulnérables et au regard de l'immensité de ces besoins, nous, acteurs humanitaires, avons jugé opportun d'appeler à une synergie d'action. Et cette synergie d'action nous impose de nous orienter, bien entendu, vers nos partenaires, que sont les banques multilatérales de développement, afin que nous puissions initier des projets innovants et qui touchent les communautés les plus vulnérables à la base. Et comme je l'ai mentionné, les femmes font partie de la frange la plus impactée par ces situations. Et en termes d'exemple, grâce bien sûr à la contribution de la Banque africaine de développement, nous avons engagé depuis plus d'1 an un projet d'autonomisation des femmes vulnérables au Sahel. Et grâce à ce projet, bien sûr, nous avons pu permettre à des femmes agricultrices d'artisanat à avoir des activités génératrices de revenus. Et comme vous pouvez le voir sur l'image qui s'affiche, nous avons aussi intérêt à ce que nos opérations soient les plus green que possible. Et bien entendu, en assistant ces bénéficiaires-là, nous nous évertuons aussi à ce qu'elles puissent contribuer à cela. Et au Mali, par exemple, nous accompagnons grâce au soutien de la Banque africaine de développement des femmes maraîchères dans les zones de Gao, de Tombouctou, qui ont été chassées par le conflit et qui se sont retrouvées en zone urbaine et qui sont sans source de revenus. Et pour la plupart sont des chefs de famille, donc avec des personnes à charge. Et donc, à travers ces contributions en vue de la mise en œuvre d'activités génératrices de revenus, non seulement ça, elles s'occupent de leur famille, mais elles contribuent justement aussi à la résilience et à avoir un impact vis-à-vis de la sécurité alimentaire. Et comme vous pourrez le voir dans cette salle, aujourd'hui qui est la journée dédiée au genre, la Banque africaine de développement et le CICR ont bien voulu mettre des visages, parce qu'il est bien de parler d'union des forces, il est bien de parler de l'action que le plaidoyer que nous faisons auprès de toutes les parties en vue d'assister ces personnes les plus vulnérables dans les situations de conflit, mais il est bon aussi de mettre des visages pour que nous puissions savoir que toutes les actions que nous menons sur le terrain sont au profit de ces bénéficiaires-là, sont au profit de Mme Maïga qui est à Tombouctou et qui a reçu un subside qui lui a permis non seulement ça, d'avoir une parcelle de terre, de multiplier ses activités en moins de 6 mois et d'avoir des bêtes, un cheptel de 8 bêtes pour pouvoir continuer encore à consolider la résilience. Ou cette dame du lac Tchad qui, malgré son handicap, ses 11 enfants, qui est divorcée et qui, à travers aussi ce projet d'autonomisation, a la possibilité, étant agricultrice qui a été déplacée par le conflit, n'a plus la possibilité d'avoir son activité se pérenniser, a été formée afin qu'elle puisse avoir une activité pâtissière et vendre des beignets. Voilà. Et c'est ce genre d'impact-là que nous voulons et c'est cet effet-là que nous souhaitons mettre à l'échelle. Et nous nous réjouissons du leadership du président de la BAD qui, lorsqu'il nous recevait il y a quelques jours, a dit qu'il fallait que nous passions à une autre étape. Et c'est cet appel-là que nous voulons lancer. Passer à une autre étape afin de toucher le maximum de personnes vulnérables des situations en conflit et en haute situation de violence. Merci.
Thank you very much for that, Jean-François. It's really what this is about, right? For millions of women and girls that are living really at the front line of the impacts of climate change. So I think that's a really important aspect of the conversation to bring in, that we talk about millions of jobs and also kind of stay at the level of that.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Innocent Antoine Weji. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Youth Initiative for Land in Africa. So through your discussion, I'm not see really the aspect of land access, which is really crucial for green job creation. Because we need to include this variable in the system of green job creation. And the second thing is we need to put together all the multi-holders platform who existing in Africa. For example, we are creating with African Union and International Land Coalition, IGAD and Landesa, a youth and land multi-holder platform in Africa, who has a mission to promote youth land access. So it's really important that we put everybody together and highlight more young people and train them, build their capacity. Because one thing is, when we have the finance and we invest to the green job, how the young people will keep this job for the long time if they don't have a good training, if they don't have a capacity building. So we need to thinking about the long-term system for the green job green job creation. So that is what I want to highlight. And if you can highlight the land access in finance, how the land is integrated in the finance, job creation, and youth also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for great insights. I'm going to be very brief. My name is Frederick from Kenya, and I work for TIA Fund, and I've been working with youth in green jobs. I think one of the important aspects that I would like to hear from the panelists is about skilling of young women. Training and especially building their capacity to be able to respond to the demands of the markets and the demands of an ever-increasing field of green jobs that needs quite a lot of retraining. And on that aspect, have you been able to work with technical and vocational training institutions, what we call TVETs, and what would be your experiences on that? And my other comment is around financing. The markets in Africa, especially where I come from in Africa, in most countries, commercial markets for young people to access financing is very expensive, it's very complicated, and the available policy or finance instruments are very inaccessible. So I would like to hear just a success case study where young women have been able to access finance either through your institutions or through some of the partners you're working in. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Last one.
Thank you. My name is Irene. I'm also from Kenya, an ambassador for the Global Evergreening Alliance. My question is on how women's involvement goes as far as compensation for what they bring on board. Because sometimes we see a lot of opportunities thinking about women at a subjective level in this sense. They are not co-creators of this knowledge. They are not co-developers of the products. And for that reason, they are basically beneficiaries
and that does not give them the opportunities to participate fairly in a manner that their ideas have a fair return on investment so that they're able to participate fairly in this space. So we need to, I think, go beyond responsiveness, but more into more co-creation so that their ideas influence what goes on and not that they are used to market what is probably meant for consumption.
No, thank you very much. I think that in the financial space, there are different products that can be used in the terms that you were considering. It can be, I mean, there are lines, specific lines that usually financial intermediaries provide to women. I mean, we have, for example, we are pioneers in Latin America with gender bonds and gender lines that are bonds or credit lines specific for women and for women SMEs. And they can, I mean, they can reach, I mean, we can provide this to commercial banks or to microfinanciers to really provide a specific credit lines for women. When, for certain reasons, the risk is high, we have a solution that I have already mentioned that is blended finance or concessional finance, by which you can have a certain amount of money that can be used to really incentivize or to reach to these populations or to these areas or to these segments where the risk and the commercial prices are not feasible. So a combination of blended finance with all the specific lines for gender, for women, it's something that we need to continue expanding to make sure that we are able to really reach to these populations.
Thanks. No, I think you raised very important points, particularly just to quickly react to the finance one. Indeed, there are many instruments out there, but your point is absolutely correct, is that to access these opportunities is a bit complicated and time-consuming. So part of the work we need to do is actually build capacities on how you bring your projects to bankability, simplified procedures to access the concessional finance. We need more grants into the sector. We need all type of instruments so there's a bit of work to be done actually, and a responsibility to bring all these instruments accessible to the younger men and women that are active in the space. On the skilling side, I think Europe, again, there is two levels. The conversation has two dimensions. One is a proper conversation and discussion with the public sector that is responsible for the science, technology, and education kind of strategies of the country, where you need to have a better matching between the supply and demand of skills. And the green economy, transformation toward green economies requires all kind of skills that we're still missing today. If we want, for example, and I was in a conversation yesterday, if we really want to get to net zero by 2050, there's an enormous demand for engineering skills in new energy technologies, in decarbonization technologies, in smart grids, in a whole range of technical skills that actually are missing, not only in developing countries, but in developed economies. So the skill gap that is required for the green transformation is there to be addressed systematically. And we have not had a credible or let's say a technical conversation with the authorities that are responsible for education, science, and engineering. We don't see them actually very often in the climate negotiations. So that's another area where we have to react to. And co-creation, absolutely right there. I mean, we see the business models that tend to bring workable, sort of more successful business models we're seeing coming out of the circular economy approach, or let's say within that logic, are the ones that are actually had in particular sector. I cannot generalize in particular sectors where women are leading these kind of enterprises in the design of the business model. So these are just few quick observations.
Okay, so thank you for both questions. So on the first one on TVET, the AfDB, we have some good examples of this type of technical and vocational training. There are some projects which have been able to really mobilize women and young women to gain skills in technology and coding in particular. There's one which is called Coding for Employment, which has been very successful in getting young women into the tech industry. And we also have a Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy. And there's dedicated trust funds looking at youth entrepreneurship and innovation, which are being used to actually mobilize the youth, the young women, to gain these technical skills. It's really about putting the ambition into practice. And if you have a deliberate approach on how you identify the women who can actually benefit from this training, capture them in the training, and then you roll this out in several countries. And we're seeing the results starting to come in. Then on the second point on women's agency, there's a saying that says, goes like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I think we need to get women into negotiating spaces where they can have these conversations on what matters to them, how women's interests can be prioritized in any green job strategies, and how these can be put into motion. There has been a lot of interest, as we've seen here in this discussion today. How do we take this forward? So we need to mobilize. We need to get women at the table and not on the menu. And I think by doing that, then we're able to really embody and incorporate their perspectives into these national and regional policies. So thank you.
Thank you so much. A quick comments, maybe, Marcus.
Yeah, thank you. I think when it's about young women, then I think we also need to create mechanism to have a change of norms, because we need to invite, like you said, we need to invite the women inside to listen to their voices, because there can't be anyone who is sitting above them and 20 or 50 years older than are saying, oh, to get the young women in jobs, then we need to do like this and this. We need to hear what they are saying and what their needs are. We need to understand their situation and their capacity. We need to understand what they need for be able to have their jobs that they require. We need to understand what situation the young people are in before we can make mechanisms to change their ways and making sure that the future looks actually brighter with them in it. So we need to listen, and then we need to be open to have a talk about changing the norm of how we will look and how we understand the role of women and men in our societies. So yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. And let's hear also from the last panelist, just a final remark from your perspective on how we are ensuring that these policies and the things we have discussed today really increase the resilience of the most vulnerable.
Thank you, Ingville. For our perspective, the last recommendation I can make is to gather all stakeholders to work by optimizing our complementary mandate, humanitarian actors, development actors, private sector, in terms of broad our various expertise to reach the most vulnerable people in the conflicts protract settings. That's the last recommendation I could say. Thank you.
And I think there was no better way of concluding the panel from what was said now last by Jean-François. So we come to the conclusion of the panel. I think we have highlighted the need for long-term vision and strategy in the largest transformation that we are doing together as humans, moving towards sustainable economy and development for all. I think that's really important. The need to bring all stakeholders together and not for women to be on the menu, but actually be around the table and in leadership of this transition. I think those are really key takeaways. So I want to thank the panelists. I will ask you to remain seated, and then we will invite the closing remark now from Ms. Barbara Rambusek, who is the Director of Gender and Economic Inclusion at the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I have to say very inspired by the discussion that I've just heard and by the various contributions from our esteemed panelists. So let me first of all thank again the African Development Bank for inviting me and the EBRD to be part of this event. Promoting gender equality and the transition towards a low-carbon economy are key strategic priorities for the EBRD. To date, the bank has invested over 20 billion euros in projects with inclusive and gender components and has signed about 35 billion projects worth 35 billion in green investments. But we also know that the challenges remain substantial. Women and girls perform over 3/4 of unpaid care work globally, 3 times as much as men, and only 55% of working-age women in the EBRD region are active in the labor force. In the energy sector, women account for only about 22% of the global labor force. In the renewable sector, it's only about 32%. But also, their leadership roles in both sectors remain very, very small. Men also outnumber women in STEM fields. Indeed, in Egypt, I think it's only 3% of STEM graduates who are women. So tackling gender equality, bringing more women into the labor market of green occupations and increasing the prominence in managerial and technical roles is therefore of huge importance. With 15 million new jobs being created in the energy sector worldwide, this is particularly relevant. Green jobs and skills are also emerging across other sectors, though. I think it's very important when we look at this green economy transition that we don't just focus on it as part of an energy transition. It is that, but it goes beyond. We know from the ILO that about 40% of all jobs have green elements already, and that number is set to rise. So if a demand for green skills is something that will be increasing across a broad range of different sectors, from energy, but also into infrastructure, agriculture, and many other sectors. At the EBRD, we actively support clients to ensure a just green transition that creates opportunities for all. Indeed, last year, we launched 2 new strategies, our new gender strategy, but also an equality of opportunity strategy that particularly looks at supporting people, businesses, communities that are affected by big, large challenges such as climate change to make sure that this transition towards a green economy is a just one. In this context, we focus on equipping women with the skills that are needed in the emerging green sectors, particularly high value-added sectors. But let me give you some examples of what actually works. We have already heard some examples from the speakers today. What we do at EBRD in Tunisia, for example, we work with our client STEG, which is the main Tunisian utility company, to develop occupational skill standards for 5 key occupations that are most critical for the further development of the sector, and also associated training programs. And very importantly, we improve the equal opportunities policies that the client has in order to enable more women to get access to these training opportunities and ultimately also the jobs. In Egypt, we have a green energy finance facility where we work with women entrepreneurs to do a number of things. First, to access finance, but also to access the know-how, the capacity, and the skills to better understand what kind of technologies are most relevant for their businesses, how do they work, and to get the know-how to be able to purchase those technologies, but also access the associated finance with that. We are also working in partnership with the Ministry for Electricity and Renewable Energy and are helping to set up a professional network for women in the renewable energy sector. But let me close with a particularly important example of our work here in Egypt. Last week at the COP, we launched the Nexus of Water, Food and Energy Initiative, where EBRD is leading on the energy part in particular in Wafi. In this context, EBRD leads on the design and implementation of the energy pillar, and we are mobilizing $500 million for technical assistance, grants and concessional loans from donors and IFIs. Importantly, this will include a targeted support for workers that are affected by the decommissioning of up to 12 gas-fired energy plants, electricity plants across the country. So in this context, we will be working with the Egyptian Energy Holding Company, as well as its subsidiaries, suppliers, etc., in order to design strategic workforce packages to support those workers that are affected through reskilling, upskilling, but also redeployment where possible, including into the local labor market. So to summarize, promoting gender equality for green employment opportunities and skills is actually not a good to have, it's absolutely essential. It's something that we have also heard from the other speakers today, is something that is the key if you want to achieve a sustainable green transition. And it is together that we can make that work, and it is also by learning from each other and inspiring each other with ideas and approaches that we can make this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I ask you also to give a hand to our panel. And today is Gender Day at COP27, so I do encourage you to circle around and join the many events that you will find that center around this conversation today. I also want to draw your attention to the photos and the exhibition that has been set up by the ICRC. And you may direct your questions on that to Jean-François and his team. And I want to thank you sincerely for choosing to spend your morning with us today. It was a true pleasure, honor, and a joy to be your host of the morning. So thank you again very much to the African Development Bank and all the partners. And I wish you a very good day for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.